So now, of course, there is concern about the rise of the Taliban. In fact, some say it's already happening. Among them, Thomas Lynch of the National Defense University. He's a U.S. Army veteran and is a former special assistant to the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff.
I would characterize it as pretty impressive already. Just to give you some numbers, this has been the most deadly year in Afghanistan for civilians, with international organizations reporting that over 10,000 civilians will have died in violence throughout Afghanistan. Most of that, I might add, at the hands of the Taliban and Taliban attacks and initiatives. Second, the Afghan National Security Forces, which have been impressively built over the last 5 to 6 years to a structure of 350,000. Well, they this year, being in the lead of security, both the national police and the national military, they will have suffered, by the time we get to the end of this week, over 5,000 killed. Now, I think about 2/3 of that is in the police forces, so they are bearing the brunt of it, but 1,800 or so have died in their military structure. So I think we've already seen a lot of violence, Taliban directed and driven, that has got us concerned that the path of Taliban return is already started.
Well, let's talk this numbers game. Look forward for me. If we're sitting down at the end of next year talking about this, how do those numbers differ? Or do they stay the same, or do they grow?
At this point, I think all reasonable trajectory projections would be that these numbers will be about as bad next year, maybe a little bit worse. And the reason is that there is definitely more of a free hand for Taliban actors, entities, and elements within southern and eastern Afghanistan. But the second piece of this is on the Pakistan side of the border, where a lot of the Taliban's leadership, we suspect, and I think it's pretty clear, hole up when there was a great push by NATO and Afghanistan forces in the last several years. I mean, many of those forces have reemerged in Afghanistan, and not just of their own volition. In some cases, they've reemerged because the Pakistani military forces, especially starting this last summer, have launched their own offensives against Pakistani Taliban, which intermixes with Afghan Taliban, and that has driven kind of a constellation of these forces back across the border, where they made life very difficult for the government of Afghanistan forces, as well as for the governance structures that have been established in the provinces of the south and southeast over the last 5 to 6 years.
You mentioned that foreign troops are not leaving. There's about 18,000, last I saw, that will stay there. Is that enough of a deterrent?
Yeah, I have to be honest here, Mike. I mean, and I've written on this, so I'm pretty consistent. No, there's not enough force left there, and more importantly, there's not enough of the right kind of force. That is, the forces that are being left behind are focused primarily on training in the training base of Afghan security forces, of advising and assisting the national defense establishment, and units that are like at what's called corps level or above, so, you know, like 2- and 3-star generals and above. And there's not that assistance down on the ground, that assistance with medical evacuation, that assistance with airstrikes, et cetera, et cetera. And I think our force is going to need to be revisited and relooked to do more of that, and also to do more of this intelligence, because Afghan abilities to track the militant milieu do not any way, shape, or form match American or Western abilities, nor do their interests in tracking them match ours. Likewise, the Pakistani intelligence services don't have the same interests in tracking those entities. So it's really a self-help world, in my view, when you look at the intelligence assets we need to leave behind. And here, I think that is the area where we are most deficient right now, and where the good news is, unlike Iraq, it's not going to take a catastrophe to cause a revisit, because the Afghans aren't telling us to leave.
Well, it's been great visiting with you. Thanks so much for your insights.
Thanks, Mike.